Hi guys, it's Zahid here from Abbey Property in Luton, and today I'll be talking to you about tenancy renewals. Are they important, or is it just something that's unnecessary and extra work, etc.? So I'll be going through it all here. If you've got any questions in between, let me know in the comments below and I'll be more than happy to get them answered. Let's get started. So a lot of landlords are concerned about this issue. Should they or should they not be renewing with the tenants? So let's figure this out. Let's see what happens here. A lot of the landlords are really worried about having to replace a brand new tenant whenever the existing one moves out. So one way to secure a tenant in is definitely to get the renewal done, as we're going to be figuring out now. Also, it's uncertainty for the landlord if your tenant hasn't renewed, because you don't know if they're going to be staying for another 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. Will you have to find a new tenant again? What do you need to do? It's uncertainty. Also, on the tenant side, it's also uncertainty for them as well. Reason being is because they might be really comfortable and familiar with the area that they're living in at the moment, the neighborhood. They might be, having I don't play the guitar. We just have it here for a display at the moment. It's just adding to the effect of it for the office, basically. So in terms of the tenants, they might be unfamiliar with. They might have to move out of place. They might have kids that have gone into a local school. So they would not want to just get up and move around, etc. So it's a good stability for the tenants to renew, and it works out really good for them as well. So how does a new fixed term tenancy benefit all of those concerns? So one of the, like I mentioned earlier on, it's a 12 months stability for the tenant plus as well as the landlord. Secondly, it helps a lot with cash flow planning in terms of the landlord side. So if you know you would regularly have income coming in for the next 6 months, 12 months, and if you regularly go abroad, that helps a lot in terms of your cash flow. If you, sorry, I'm laughing because I'm seeing some of the comments. If you are regularly, for example, out the country, it definitely helps a lot with your cash flow. And in terms of, for example, if you're going on a holiday, you know that you don't need to worry about your tenants are going to be getting up and leaving whilst you're going away, and you will not have to have the stress of having to organize everything whilst you're abroad. So that helps a lot, and also helps you to plan 12 months in advance, gives you an idea of what to expect for the future as well, and in terms of getting your everything sort of stuff in place. So for the tenants, like I mentioned earlier on, it helps them with the kids planning for the school, helps with the neighborhood as well, planning, etc. And it also helps with the inconvenience of having to sort of get up and move. It's a win-win for everyone. Also, it reduces the tenant turnover. So as you can imagine, the summer months are the most sort of turnover time that you're going to get with your tenants. So you want to avoid having tenants out of a contract in that period. Not for any bad reasons or anything like that. It's just simply just to keep it consistent for yourself. And also what you're trying to get your tenants is to commit to you during that sort of period, so that in the middle of summer, when everyone's moving around, it's not just a spur of the moment decision that they just get up and leave you and having to sort of replace you with a tenant. So that's another benefit. So far we touched on the fixed term, stability, and also reduced tenant turnover. The next one is less wear and tear. So the way this one works is if you got the less tenants constantly, switching around every year or so, it's less wear and tear on your property. The way that works is imagine you've got a tenant that's living at your property, that's been there for 12 months, and now they renewed again for another 12 months and another 12 months. Now they've ended up staying there for 5 years. They will definitely make far less wear and tear for yourself, as opposed to getting a brand new tenant every single year for the next 5 years. So in both circumstances, you've had a tenant that's been there for 5 years, or you've had 5 different tenants there 1 year each. In the latter example, you'll definitely get far more wear and tear, etc. And what that means for yourself financially as a landlord is you've got less maintenance to consider. So 2 ways that is due to happen is, first of all, you've got less wear and tear, that's leading to less maintenance costs. And secondly, at the end of the tenancy, every time a tenant gets up and leave, you don't have to spend as much on having to refurbish the property, etc., and spending all that money, etc., bringing it up to a good standard again before you're able to rent it out. Also, it works out to be a lot more cost efficient as well. Imagine having to sort of pay someone or an agent, or even sort of get involved in yourself and your time and effort of advertising the property, doing all the viewings, etc., doing all the referencing, getting people to the door, agreeing deals, etc. Imagine having to do that every single 12 months. It's a lot of time, effort, resources, and there's a lot that goes behind it as well. So if you can completely avoid that by renewing again with your tenants for another 12 months, that's great. And it works out excellent for everyone. The reason why you want to keep these tenants in place is because you already have built a good relationship with them. You already know them, who they are, what they are like, and that helps in terms of getting like a good perspective of where things are going to be going in the future. So especially like an example, like a time right now, just the whole COVID situation, etc. You get a better understanding of your tenants, how they're going to be like in those sort of circumstances, and how they're likely to behave. Secondly, if they're maintaining your property in a good condition, you want to keep it up like that in a decent state, and keep those tenants that are maintaining in a good condition. And good tenants are worth their weight in gold, literally. You also reduce the risk of ending up with bad tenants. So if you had a single tenant in your property for 5 years, that's just one tenant. Now imagine you have to get a new tenant every 12 months. That's 5 set of tenants that you're going through, and it's 5 different people, 5 different personalities, 5 different chances of going in the wrong direction, possibly selecting the wrong person. So you're minimizing your risk of having to end up with a bad tenant at the same time as well. The other thing is there's no surprises. So for example, like a lot of the time which is the most stressful time for a lot of landlords is the Christmas period, where tenants get up and leave right at the beginning of December, and there's hardly any demand during that period. So it's very, very difficult to find a new tenant. Generally tends to be the case that if you can't find someone within the first week of December, the next second, third, fourth week, etc., you're definitely going to find anyone, because everyone's out busy with family, etc., shopping, etc. So not many people are looking for homes. Demand is very low. So essentially what's going to happen is you might have to end up renting it really cheap, or you might have to keep a void period for like a whole month, or possibly even longer. So that's something to bear in mind. So by renewing, you can try avoiding the tenancy ending around that period of time. You want to avoid it sort of ending around that time, so that you don't have the same issue. And it can be really stressful. We've experienced that with a few landlords that find it very difficult, whenever circumstance like that happens. Similarly, for example, Easter is another time where a lot of people are abroad, not many people are moving in and out houses. So that's something else to experience at the same time as well. The biggest time where everyone's getting out and about is the summertime. So just keep that in mind. You've got less void periods. So some stats that I've managed to sort of collect for today is in 2018, the official stats for void periods. A void period is a period where no one's living inside the property to pay you the rent. So it was 2.9 weeks out of the year. That's almost a month. So if your property's on for £1,000, that's almost £750 out of pocket. And in 2019, that was 3 weeks. So these stats are slightly a bit older. I haven't got the most recent ones yet, but you can see it's slowly creeping up. That's one thing. And if you add these two together, let's see, imagine this is that trend, and you do it over 5 years, that's 3.75 months. So that's almost 4 months that you're losing out by not renewing and having a void period in between tenants moving in and out. So keep that in mind as well. Is it worth the risk? That's just the stats. If you want to get access to the stats, just let me know. I'll be able to send them to you. Just message me. Also, you get more protection. So the law is changing every single year. And every time a new legislation comes out, you want to make sure it's in your tenancy agreement and you're protected against it. And any loopholes that are in there that a tenant could exploit, you want to get it fully sealed off and covered. So a good letting agent, or even yourself as a landlord, you should be looking at this on a yearly basis. A letting agent should minimum review their tenancy agreement at least once a year minimum, and update that as regularly as possible, so just to minimize those loopholes that could be possibly exploited. Now, over the 5 years, you're protecting yourself 5 separate times. Imagine having the same tenancy agreement all the way to the end and not renewing for a whole 5-year period. Imagine the amount of legislation, etc., everything that has changed, and the amount of loopholes and everything else you're possibly exploiting yourself to. So just that's something really important to sort of keep that in mind. Right, rent review is another thing definitely worth considering. The reason why is because a lot of landlords, they prefer to keep the tenant in there and not increase the rent, and that's like an incentive for the tenant that the longer you stay, we'll keep the rent as low as possible, etc., which works out really good as well. Equally, we have a lot of landlords which want to increase the rent as well. So generally speaking, a lot of landlords even decide to increase the rent according to the inflation stats as well. So that's the RPI or the CPI, etc. So just to make sure they're not too excessive or whatever, and also to make sure that the tenant doesn't look anywhere else. Now, if you look at the rent review, let's say we just did £10 at every renewal. What that means is that's £120 for that year. The following year, you still got the £120, which you would have got otherwise, but then also another 120 because you've increased it again in the second year. Now, if you add them over, just on a £10 increase, over 5 years, that's £1,700. That's just on a basic £10 increase, and you could easily do more than that as a landlord. So obviously, I'm not saying you should, or you shouldn't, how much you should increase it, etc. It should be in line, and also carefully considered to the tenant. In regards to, do you want to, have them stay as long as possible, or do you want a slightly longer void period, etc., to replace them? Keep that in consideration. But generally speaking, what I'm trying to highlight here is a £10 increase itself can be quite a significant amount. Crazy calculation. If you want to find out how I calculated that, the exact details of it, just get in touch again, and I'll be able to answer that for you. Now, the final thing I want to let you know about is, now that we've covered all the pros and cons, etc., everything of renewals, before you renew, this process should start at least 2 or 3 months beforehand. So you should have an active discussion with your tenants to find out what their intentions are with this, and it gives you enough time for them to sort of decide what's right for them, and also yourself to decide what's right for yourself. So some of the things you want to keep into consideration when you are doing this is your routine inspection report. So over the last 6 months, 12 months, you should be inspecting the property every 6 months. So within 1 year, you should have at least inspected it twice. During that period, how's the property kept like? So you want to obviously keep that into mind when you're renewing. If the property's been kept fantastic, you want to renew. If it's not been kept great, you want to either do something about it, or you don't want to renew. In terms of the promptness of rent, how many payments has the tenant missed? Keep that in mind as well. Are they prompt on time? Are you having to constantly keep chasing for your rental payment? Keep that in mind as well. The maintenance history and the property access. So how's the maintenance be like? Is there a lot of wear and tear constantly going on? Is there extra maintenance issues that you generally wouldn't expect within a short period of time from a tenancy? Is there a lot of damage being made? Keep that into mind. Really important again. And during the time that the maintenance is reported, how easy is it for a trader or a contractor to get into the property to rectify those problems? Are the tenants given easy access? Are they letting you go in with your spare copy of the key, or you're letting your letting agent go in with a spare copy of the key? Or are they even facilitating enough times, convenient times for the contractor to go around? That's something you also want to keep into consideration. If tenants are difficult, very hard to work with, etc., you should think about if you want to renew with them or not, and if you want to keep them as long-term tenants. The rental value. As a good letting agent or a good landlord, you should definitely be doing your research. before approaching your tenants in regards to renewals. That's something really important. How much is a similar property like that worth at the moment on that similar street or nearby, etc.? Definitely something you want to keep in mind. So should you, based on that research, increase your rent or keep it the same? What should you be doing? And if you do want to increase it, are you able to reasonably justify it to your tenants as well? To explain to them in a nice manner that, look, the rent's gone up and you want to increase it by a certain amount, etc. as well. Don't forget, your tenants will also want to know this information. They want to know if it's justified, etc. You know, it could affect the way they sort of feel. So that's really important to ensure that they're equally on board with it at the same time, and you have sufficient evidence. So your letting agent should definitely be able to produce all this way in advance. If you're managing yourself, then you should have enough resources available to be able to carry that out. All of this you want to keep into consideration before signing a tenancy agreement. So make sure all of that is up to date before something is done. So yeah, that's all for now. That's another 12 months worth of rent secured up, etc. Tenants secured up for the property. So it's a win-win for everybody. Minimizing the risk, etc. So yeah, any questions? I'll wait in the comments just for a couple of seconds to see if any questions come up. I'm more than happy to answer those. If not, then we'll head off. But in the meantime, I'll just quickly review what we went over. So we went over the fixed term, the certainty that it gives to the tenant, the landlord, the stability it gives for them when they got their kids, etc. in the schools nearby. It also gives makes it inconvenience, a win-win for everyone. It reduces the amount of turnover that you get in the tenants, coming and leaving constantly, preventing spur of the moment people to sort of, tenant to leave. It reduces the wear and tear, as we discussed as well. It's more cost efficient. You already know the tenants, you already know their habits, you already know how they're keeping the property. There's no surprises, less void periods, like I mentioned earlier. Over 5 years period, you could be accounting up to 4 months worth of void, and that's not even keeping in consideration the fair wear and tear and other maintenance issues that you could also be stumbling across. It's more protection, like I mentioned, with the law changing constantly, you're evolving your tenancy agreement to reflect that, protecting yourself more. Rent review gives you a chance to up your rent, like I mentioned, £10 extra, and that's £1,700 that I've done for my calculations earlier, very, very easily. And all the things that I mentioned before renewing that you want to keep into consideration: the routine inspections, how prompt they are with paying the rent, the maintenance history with the property, and how easily they've been giving you access, and the rental value of the property currently at the moment. That's great. I hope you guys enjoyed that live today. Any questions, drop them down in the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to answer them next week. Thank you, and bye for now.